Hello everyone and welcome to D2O Heavy Water. In this video we will take a journey through a number of films that on the surface are connected to each other only through Italian actress Monica Bellucci, who stars in them. In one of these films she plays the central character, while in the others her roles are rather marginal. We will however find a strange continuity between these roles, which in turn will lead us to identify a major archetype and symbolism hidden in plain sight, belonging to beliefs and systems of thought, some of which are mainstream, while the others are rather arcane. We will nevertheless find that the latter appear to be surprisingly prevalent. We will therefore try to identify and understand these. Monica Bellucci is a very prolific performer, and her career spans several decades. Its cinematic peak, however, was in the early 2000s, when the actress was in her mid-30s. That is the period when she attained fame outside Italy and got major roles in Hollywood and French films. Nevertheless, our first film today is an Italian one. Malena, that came out exactly at the turn of the millennium, is a coming-of-age story set in a Sicilian town during World War II, with two main characters: teenage boy Renato, through whose eyes we see the events unfold, and the titular Malena, a woman who the boy as well as the rest of the town are obsessed with. Malena's husband goes to war, and news of his death in combat follow later in the film. She thus lives alone and takes care of her ailing father, who lives and teaches in the town, having moved there with her following her marriage. Malena is naturally beautiful, and we learn that she's a seamstress by trade. She thus probably creates the colorful dresses that she wears, all in contrast to the rest of the town's plain-looking and very conservatively dressed women. This causes envy and resentment among the latter, who spread unfounded rumors about her promiscuity. At the same time, for the town's male population, including the puberty-stricken Renato, she becomes an object of desire. This obviously is a cocktail for disaster. Malena is harassed. Her father gets a note slandering her, and abiding by the age-old unwritten rules of honor that govern the land, as well as his own insecurities and quest for respect, he disowns her. She is falsely accused of prostitution and put on trial, acquitted only to be violated by her lawyer. The war comes to the town, and her father is killed in an Allied air raid, while German troops are garrisoned in expectation of the upcoming Allied invasion. Having no resources or work to support herself, and being harassed and scorned by the townsfolk, who consider her to be a prostitute, Malena resorts to become one, to the temporary satisfaction of everybody. She bleaches her hair and takes up residence in the town's hotel. In her new professional capacity, she cohabits with German military personnel. When the town is liberated, Malena is lynched by the town's women, who beat her, rip her clothes off, and cut off her hair, a ceremony repeated thousands of times over in hundreds of liberated towns and villages, from Sicily to Norway. She has to flee the town. It then emerges that her husband had not died, but had been crippled and made prisoner of war. Upon being freed, he returns looking for her, but cannot find her, with all the townsfolk keeping silent about her story and fate. Renato guides him with a note of her whereabouts, and the husband leaves. The couple return after 1 year, and Malena's status in the town has changed. She now lives with her husband, dresses more plainly, and is thus accepted and respected by the inhabitants. Other than the themes of coming of age, and that of the tragedy of the millions of men, women, and children who lived, suffered, and died through the tragedy that was World War II, The film's main subject is the role and status of women in society. The division of women into castes of respectable family women and prostitutes. Notice that there are actual prostitutes in town, but these do not get harassed or punished because their status is clearly defined and accepted. Malena's is not. Initially, she doesn't engage in anything dishonorable, and she's a married woman, but she's a newcomer to the town, doesn't have children, and her husband is absent. Furthermore, she doesn't conform to the strict rules that apply to how women should look, dress, and behave. Even more important, she's passive and doesn't make friends or attempt to fight back unwanted attention and slander. And the only relative who could have spoken for her, her father, disowned her. All of this puts her in a very dangerous liminal space between that of respectable family women and prostitutes. The town is governed by strict rules regarding status, honor, and respect, and non-conformism is not tolerated and punishable. A couple of interesting moments are that besides the obvious economic incentives, Malena's turning to prostitution might be related to the death of her father. First, because not having any relatives or friends, she feels that she became free of any family and social obligations and rules. Second, that she perhaps turns to the Germans as a revenge for her father's death being caused by the opposing allies. Also, the transition into prostitution is loudly signaled by the dyeing of the hair red and bleaching it blonde. And the cigarette, an unhealthy anti-procreation habit, identified worldwide with female promiscuity and sexual freedom, ever since being introduced by propaganda and mass psychology guru Edward Bernays in 1929 in the Torches of Liberty campaign, making it a symbol of female emancipation. Malena engages in prostitution for a living, but throughout most of recorded history and across most human societies, prostitution is equated with female, or the similar passive homosexual male promiscuity, and the payment part is a minor, non-defining detail. The town is as socially conservative as it would have been in pre-modern times, and the story could probably have taken place any time within recorded history, and anywhere between, for instance, today's Pakistan and the Kingdom of Judea 2000 years ago. It is, however, to the latter period and place that many clues in the film point. This is the story of a woman accused of prostitution, punished by an angry mob, when she had to endure a lynching, shed tears and shed her hair, then redeemed, after the bleached hair symbolizing her sin was gone. It is the story of the adulterous woman who was about to be stoned by an angry mob, only to be saved by Jesus, whose feet she washed with her tears and hair. Later embodying the archetype of the repentant sinner woman. Traditionally, that woman is identified as Mary Magdalene, and it cannot be a coincidence that the film's titular character is named Malena, which is a diminutive of Magdalena, and that the boy is named Renato, which translates as reborn or resurrected, if you will, an attribute of Jesus. Notice that just like Jesus, Renato helps her in his own way by attacking her slanderers, and finally by leading her husband back to her, which redeems her. Also, her husband is made prisoner, crippled, and declared dead, only to reappear and act akin to resurrection. This makes Renato and the husband into a continuum of the same figure, through the different attributes of character, arc, and name, the figure of course being Jesus Christ. Another interesting twist about the husband's resurrection is that besides the adulterous woman, Mary Magdalene is often also identified as being the same person as Mary, sister of Martha, and of Lazarus, who of course was resurrected. This brings us to our next film. Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ came out 4 years later and retells one of the central stories of Christianity, that of Jesus' last days and crucifixion. What interests us the most today, however, is that this film also deals with the theme of the adulterous woman, and that it identifies her as Mary Magdalene. Also that the role is again played by the very same Monica Bellucci. It is worth noting that despite Mary Magdalene being assimilated to the adulterous woman in both productions and in most people's minds, such an assimilation has not always been as unanimous. The Gospels mention both the adulterous woman and Mary Magdalene, but never actually state that one is the other. And it was only in the 6th century that the Catholic Church adopted that assimilation, while the Eastern Orthodox churches never have. Other than Mary Magdalene actually being the adulterous woman, and it being passed down in some unwritten oral tradition, the reason of their assimilation must either be the necessity of a holy prostitute archetype to exist alongside that of the Holy Mother as represented by the Virgin Mary, as it did under other forms and names in multiple pagan cults that preceded Christianity, or else a smear campaign by the Church against Mary Magdalene for her representing something that the Church identified as an enemy. It is therefore interesting that supposedly Catholic fundamentalist director Mel Gibson, who stuck to a quite strict interpretation of the Gospels when creating his picture, to the point of being accused of fueling anti-Semitism, still chose this apocryphal identification of the sinner woman as Mary Magdalene to be included. Enter the Matrix series. In 2003 and 2004, Monica Bellucci played the role of Persephone in 2 installments of the original trilogy. It's a minor character in these strongly allegorical stories, and is portrayed as the avatar of a computer program. She is named after Persephone from classical mythology, where she's also known as Cora or the Maiden, who is abducted and forced married to Hades, king of the underworld. The mythological Persephone is positioned with her mother Demeter, a goddess of fertility, in a way resembling the positioning of Mary Magdalene with the Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus. So much for the name. What's interesting, however, is that in the film her sexuality is showcased, and she's involved in an adulterous interaction with the messianic Neo, portrayed by Keanu Reeves. She's married to another program avatar, and the latter is very strangely named Merovingian, or Merovingian, which is of course the name of an early medieval dynasty of Frankish kings who ruled what is now France after the fall of the Roman Empire. The Merovingien is played by the French actor with the very English name of Lambert Wilson. The inclusion of the Merovingien in the story as husband of a Monica Bellucci character has a purpose. In 2003, American fiction writer Dan Brown published one of the most successful novels of the time. The Da Vinci Code dealt with themes of symbolism, secret societies, Gnosticism, and the like. It was inspired by Holy Blood, Holy Grail, a non-fiction speculative book published in 1982 by Michael Bagent, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln, a British trio of historians who researched the supposed mysteries of Rennes-le-Château and the Priory of Sion. The former is a likely mystification that arose from a 19th century French provincial priest living above and beyond his means and building this tower, named the Tower of Magdala, or Tower of the Tower, since Magdala, the place where Mary Magdalene came from, translates as tower in Hebrew. The Priory of Sion is quite probably a hoax about a secret society supposedly operated by the Knights Templar since the time of the Crusades, that claims to have involved some of the brightest minds in history, who are all said to have guarded a secret that has lived for 2000 years, the Holy Grail itself, although in a very different form than usually perceived and understood. One of the secret society's heads is supposed to have been Leonardo da Vinci himself, and it is claimed that he alluded to that secret in his works, especially The Last Supper. In the Da Vinci Code, the Catholic Church tries to suppress the secret society by assassinating its head, and only thanks to the intervention of American professor Robert Langdon, played by Tom Hanks in the book's cinematic adaptation, is the secret safeguarded. The hoax, books, and subsequent film might be there for clout and fortune, as well as to cater for a longing for mysticism that characterizes postmodern societies. They, however, deal with the certain existing apocryphal ideas and beliefs, sometimes attributed to what we call Gnosticism, recorded in various early Christian texts that were not included in the Bible, where Mary Magdalene is said to have been the favorite disciple of Jesus, and sometimes to have been in an intimate relationship or marriage with him, as is supposedly depicted in the Last Supper, where Mary Magdalene has red hair and sits next to Jesus. Further apocryphal and esoteric tradition claims that the marriage resulted in descendants that are said to have married into an early Frankish dynasty. Guess which? So we have it again. Being the wife of the Merovingian makes Monica Bellucci Mary Magdalene once more. These beliefs that the Holy Grail, the chalice that carried the blood of Jesus Christ, is actually not an artifact but the body of Mary Magdalene and of all her descendants in the Merovingian dynasty and beyond, who in them carried and passed down the blood of Christ to individuals living today. Making Christ's attributes, power and status inheritable and dynastic is something that some people believe, and the many more accept subconsciously by accepting the monarch's divine right to rule, not by virtue of arms or popular choice, but by that of birth, and not by divine appointment or anointment, but through direct divine descendants. Notice how the European royal families are all related, and arguably the majority of US presidents are related to them too. Notice also that similar systems of the divine being passed to the royal through blood exist in other parts of the world. Examples of that would be the Emperor of Japan, the many Sayyids in the Islamic world, and others. This carnal interpretation is opposed mainly by the official position of most Christian churches. This conflict is expressed in the Da Vinci Code by the conflict between the Catholic Church and the secret society guarding the descendants of Christ. There are a couple more lesser connections, where Monica Bellucci played related roles. Most notably French film Le Pacte des Loups, or Brotherhood of the Wolf, from 2001, set around the legend of the Beast of Gévaudan in the 18th century, where she plays a secret agent of the Pope posing as a prostitute. Having multiple films from different productions and countries choose the same performer to play the same character, whether portrayed explicitly or more or less subtly, makes it quite unlikely that this is a mere coincidence. After all, two dots make a line, and the likelihood of a third one being on it by mere chance is very low indeed. Therefore, the question of the mechanism by which this occurred becomes legitimate. How is it decided that every major role based on Mary Magdalene will be portrayed by Monica Bellucci? What do you think about it? It appears that the turn of the millennium that coincided with her fame peak also coincided with a hyperactivity of this Magdalenist sect in the form of books, films, articles, documentaries, and the like, and that there must have been some sort of consensus who is to portray that character on screen. The choice of that very attractive performer could have been made as part of an ideological publicity campaign that might have added to subliminally attracting audiences towards this set of beliefs and away from those held by mainstream religion. Finally, what's most interesting is that Monica Bellucci didn't play in the Da Vinci Code film. She speaks fluent French and could easily pull off a French accent in an English language film. She could have played the role of Sophie Neveu, descendant of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and the Merovingian kings. If she was deemed too old for the role, couldn't she be put in a flashback scene where she would play Mary Magdalene herself? Do you know anything about it? What are your thoughts? Let's start a civilized discussion in the comments section. Of course, all the films mentioned here, as well as the subjects discussed, deserve deeper dives. For more of this, please like, share, subscribe. Allow notifications and comment to support the channel. Please also watch other videos that have been published. Thank you and see you soon.